Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. So hello engagers, we are back this week with Clark Aldrich, or Aldrich. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but before we get that right, Clark, are you prepared to engage?
I am prepared to engage.
Did I get the last name decently?
It's the second time around, you got it perfectly.
Fantastic. So Clark is here because he's an education technology thought leader, and he's the author of 5 books and developer of patent and award-winning projects. He's currently building custom short sims for organizations using a revolutionary methodology that he has pioneered or helps them build their own through shortsims.com. He's also the host of an audio series called Education X Media, which you can find in edbymedia.com, about evolving pedagogy in academics, corporations, and the military. So very, very interesting topics, and that's why we have you here today, Clark, because we want to discuss all the things that we've talked about here and maybe some more. So is there anything we missed from that intro?
Sounds great. I'll take it.
Let's take it from here. So what does it feel to be Clark Aldrich in a day like this one? Like, what's your... I don't want to say regular days because it maybe is not the situation, but what is the life with Clark feel nowadays?
I do a lot of building of sims. I mean, I spend a lot of my day actually constructing a kind of sim that I call short sims for various clients. And so my goal is to always have a bunch of very different kinds of clients, everything from, as you said, military on one hand to corporations on the other to academic and nonprofits, just to round things out and do different kinds of projects for each of them and try to cross-pollinate techniques. And I'm one of those people who I really can't read very well in terms of learning about how to do stuff. I really have to sit down and bang it out myself. So I probably have spent more time actually creating educational experiences than perhaps most. And so it's every day is spent actually building them, and that consists of everything from interviewing subject matter experts to obviously taking notes, to scaffolding out sims, to actually creating them, and the part in between, which is to fret a lot and worry and ponder and try to figure out a good way of presenting things.
Sounds very interesting, and you're very deep into the works right now, so that's very, very exciting because what's coming up is a lot of that. And in that same line, we would like to know, Clark, and this is one of the questions we love to make because they bring out many interesting things about our guests, their experience, and what we can learn from our guests as well. And that question is about failure. And we would like to know if you have a story that you can tell us, which you would maybe call your favorite fail or first attempt in learning. And of course, what you learned from that, was it doing a short sim, a game, gamification, whatever it was related to this field. Let us know what happened there. Take us to the ground level. We want to be there with you, and we want to learn with you as well as much as we can.
I had a client, and I'd rather not mention the name, but it was a very large organization, and they wanted me to create a custom leadership simulation for them. And so I did a bunch of interviews with them, and it was going incredibly well. And this is an organization that was very, very focused on leadership. Leadership was a very critical part of their own success. And I created a really nice scaffolding, a really nice methodology for doing a simulation. It was an interpersonal conversation, but at the same time, there was a map in the bottom right corner of the screen, sort of a mini map, that visualized sort of the topography of the conversation and did it in sort of like a labyrinth game where you're trying to get a ball through a maze, but instead of a maze, you're trying to get a ball past certain barriers were there. There was fog of war if the person didn't trust you. In some cases, you had to go around the barriers, but in some cases, you really had to break through the barriers. And so literally, going around the barrier might be finding another solution, but breaking down the barrier may either be in sort of an aggressive way of forcing the person sort of back away from their position, but much more effectively in some cases is to say, you can't meet me in Boston. Well, and so someone said, no, I can't meet you in Boston. Well, why not? Well, it turned out, I don't have bus fare. I don't have plane fare. So it's trying to look at problems very differently. So it was a great interface. It was very fluid. but I tried to make it as much more of like a computer game in terms of graphics and animation and underlying algorithms, and I really tried to make it fully dynamic and game-like. And as a result of that decision on my process, ended up taking a lot longer than it should have, and cost more on my side and on the client side than I wanted it to. And the ending effect was never as good as I'd hoped it was. And so I still, that was a good failure, but certainly not a not a fun one, and one that I still wake up in the middle of the night really fretting about, even though it was over a decade ago. But it was just sort of the attempt at trying to create something almost too authentic and trying to dig too far into, into the AI and into the algorithms to make it really compelling. And also in my case, sort of to try to create an engine I could use for other projects as well. And it was just too far. And it reminded me of a story that some of us tell, and you may have heard this, but there's a someone in a theater who wanted to create, having putting out on a play, and wanted to have an effect of having, say, a bowling ball disappear from one part of the stage, spin around, and appear at a different part of the stage. And they, that person, the director hired two people. One of them did it, one of them spent forever doing it. It was incredibly expensive and never quite worked. The other one created a solution where it worked perfectly every time and it wasn't very expensive. The first person was an engineer and the second person was a magician. And it just, there's just times when you want to make things sort of perfect and authentic and have the underlying equations, but other times you just want it to work, and almost how it works doesn't really matter. All that matters is sort of the experience of the user. And so I think I spent far too much time on the engineering side of it and not nearly enough time on the magician side of it.
So, of course, that I think that was a key learning for you in that situation, because you were trying to get the many things right and also to be able to replicate it, even though you didn't even know if it was going to be replicated or not. But what would you say was a key learning from that experience that you had, and something or something that you would do, like running into that? What would you do differently if you did it nowadays?
I would love to do it again, and I think often about doing it again. The whole short sum philosophy that I've been working on is how do you create almost a simulation of a simulation? How do you worry about the interface, worry about the graphics, worry about the underlying mechanics, but not worrying about it from a programming perspective, worrying about it from a look and feel perspective? And how do you create something that has the illusion of deep computation, or simulates a simulation, simulates the deep computation, when in fact it just has everything almost the equivalent of having everything pre-rendered and pre-designed, and letting people play through it in a way that's not open-ended. It just feels open-ended.
So that's interesting. It's a nice field to continue to explore. And like precisely with this new, well, maybe it's about this new perspective that you got on this or something else, but what would you say is another story, completely different, instead of failure, going for something that actually went well? You set up to tackle this big challenge, this massive challenge, and on the first or the second or the fifth try, you got it right, and it was a complete success for your measurements. Can you tell us such a story of, I don't know, one of your experiences or something? Like, we want to know as much details as we can. We want to learn and be there with you once again.
Well, let me give you two stories that are exactly the opposite. One of them, one early one, was the design of a product called Virtual Leader, which was probably my most famous simulation, certainly the most number of people who have played it. And I wanted to create a leadership simulation that was fully game-like and had full, game-like feel to it, except teach something that was really useful, not just how to shoot aliens, which is, I guess, useful in a different way. So trying to create it, and I got a nice little team together through a company called Simulearn. We created 30,000 lines of AI code. We got some game animators to animate the situation. And it was, it took a year to do. It was incredibly hard. I mean, I was working on Christmas morning. I was working on my birthday all day long, trying to get everything right and work with the team. And we created a situation that was very, the end program, again, Virtual Leader, was very fluid. The AI worked perfectly, much to my surprise. The animation was very fluid and very cool. And it really created a very interesting situation. And we were able to deploy it in a bunch of different environments, including the military, but also corporations and academics. And it was a real leading edge. It won a bunch of awards. It made a lot of money. And so that was just a terrifically fun challenge. No one on the team had ever done anything like that before, which is to kind of create a real educational simulation with the affordances of a computer game. And so that was really, really fun, although really, really, really hard. The second example I'm going to give.
Can I pause you there? Because I would like to know, what would you say were the for you, that some of the key elements or some of the things that you think like took you on that path towards success, versus if those things hadn't been done, you probably would have been talking about the same project, but probably another one.
Just perseverance. I mean, it was just we bit off more than we could chew by a long shot, and everything we didn't know how we were going to solve. And I think we just, as a team, we just stuck at it. We did not accept failure. We kept grinding forward, and being able to bring in some insanely talented people from the programming side and from the computer animation side. So having access to some real world class talent who are able to take some time out of their real schedule and sort of dedicate to this project. So I think the talent of the team made all the difference in the world, and it would not have worked if any of 7 or 8 different people who were involved in it were not committed to it, not just involved in it. It would have failed.
Wow. That's a very important thing to learn from, about the importance of the team. If you're working in a team, I think it's fundamental. So you were going to tell us another story as well. So I'm going to hold you to that.
So here's the exact opposite story, which is I'm just currently working in a project with, in this case, a large government organization, and we're creating a situation where we have, there's probably going to be a typical e-learning program with probably 15 modules in it, and each module is going to have some interactions to it. And so again, what I call short sims, but these very self-contained 7 or 8 or 9 minute interactions that have a bunch of interactivity all around helping people, in this case, get certified for a certain requirement. And it's exactly the opposite. First of all, there's no team involved. It's just me making the end-to-end simulation. And in a lot of cases, I'm interviewing the subject matter experts in the morning, and then 36 hours later, turning in a very complete first draft, but very complete sim. It'll have a few typos and maybe a few logic breaks, but something that works really well enough to be fixed sort of in 1 or 2 additional days. And so going from a 1-year project to create a 20-hour sim that's highly computer game centric to taking roughly 3 days to create a very satisfying, pedagogically incredibly valid, satisfactory interactive experience. And then doing that a lot, and then doing that 15 or 20 times, and creating a course that has a tremendous amount of very, very useful interactivity in a way that's very simple and very straightforward and doesn't waste the user time, and in this case meets the needs of every single stakeholder.
So going directly for the objective and achieving it in a shorter piece of time. And what changed from one perspective to the other one?
Lots of experience both building things, but also lots of experience pitching things. I spent a lot of time in front of clients or prospective clients saying, here's what you should do, and here's why. And a tremendous amount of great ideas that came out of my shop didn't find the light of day, didn't get fulfilled because the costs were too high, and more importantly, in some cases, the time frame was too high. And so my entire last 7 or 8 years has been saying, how do we streamline the process to the absolute minimum necessary interactions to be the perfect educational experience? And by perfect educational experience, I mean something that actually does develop conviction and competence. Both of those are really important, but in a way that is aligned with the typical corporation or academic institution's time frame, budget frame, review process, because we had to create Virtual Leader in a vacuum and then present it completely to a client. But if you're developing something for a client, you have a million different review sessions, and it's almost impossible to review a complicated game in front of clients. They want to see things and hit them individually. And so creating things that were very satisfactory from someone who's used to computer games, but still something that, again, delivers the bang for the buck is incredibly satisfying today.
Wow. And because the next question that I always like to make is about the process that you follow. But with all the experience that you've had, I'm thinking you've shifted gears quite a few times. So before we get into the details of maybe what you do today or what you find is most successful, I'd like to know what, like from a process perspective or the way you do things, what were the fundamental changes for going from one to the other? Like, I don't know, you implemented Agile, or I don't know if there's such a specific thing, but what would you say in very broad terms is what changed from that perspective to this perspective you have now?
I think understanding very specifically what problems occur in the real world. And so if I was doing a simulation on, say, leadership, for example, I would talk to the right person and learn all the mistakes and just say, what are the 10 or 15 mistakes that you see people make in this area? And make a very, very focused experience that just focuses on those 15 or 16 mistakes and have it be, again, 10 minutes long, and then push that out into the real world, let people learn from it. And then people go, oh, that's great, but wow, you forgot these 5 things. Okay, great. We'll do another one, and then another one. And so, I'd rather make, 15 short sims over the course of 30 weeks than one big simulation over the course of 30 weeks. And then, each time that I release it, then people can look at it and say, great, you've knocked off more, but now that you've done that, I'm now aware that we haven't covered these 3 things. And so have it be a completely iterative process, but also much more of a bite-sized process.
So the iteration, I'm guessing, is one of the centerpieces here of the change in this perspective.
Absolutely, and yet it's still, we're still using a lot of, game techniques, and probably my favorite game technique is a learning curve, is level design. How do you create a sim where the first level, the first time someone sits down, is self-evident in terms of how to play it. You don't have to teach anyone how to play it. And then the second level is a tiny bit harder, and the third level is a tiny bit harder. And again, whether it's Angry Birds or Doom or some educational experience, every single time we're just slowly expanding people's skill cones. We're slowly allowing them to become more and more comfortable. And after 10 minutes of 7 levels, and each level pushes them a little bit more, a little more. You'd be amazed at how much you can learn in 10 minutes if it's an interactive experience that uses skill cones and learning curves and good level design well. So there's just incredibly powerful techniques from the computer game world that we need to apply. It's not even we should apply. We need to apply to educational content.
Talking about all those terms that you've been using, I'm guessing that you put it all together. There's, if of course you can share it and what you can share about how do you, when you sit down, a client comes up or you're thinking about something new, how do you go about it? Do you have a process? Is it just sort of a brainstorming? How does it happen when you're creating one of these experiences? What do? You grab a piece of paper, you sit down with the team, like what does it look like? If there's, of course, a set of steps or something similar, we would love to hear that as well.
Sure. I mean, the first step is to really understand the problem. There's no question. Every single good simulation is the result of a superior knowledge of the problem. And so I'll use an example. I was working with a credit card company, and they wanted to help all of their employees understand basically the perspective of the users, the perspective of some of the people using the credit cards. And so one thing that I was doing was looking at merchants. And so they asked me to almost create a merchant simulation to help people do it. So the first thing I did is I just talked to a lot of people, both within the company and then also outside the company. One way of talking to people outside the company is chat rooms. What do people complain about when it comes to, in this case, credit cards, from a merchant perspective, when they're looking at getting help? What are the problems that they have, kind of stuff. And then talking to a lot of the experts. And so you spend a long time just immersing yourself in the content like a pig in slop. I mean, you're just rolling around in this stuff. And then again, you might have 3 or 4 or 5 interviews with people, and you ask them the tough questions. What do people get wrong? What do people get right? What's the right way of doing it? Why do people make mistakes? What's the false, whatever. So you really just get to know the content really, really well, and what the opportunity is. And then there's that time when you're in all this content and you have no clue what you're going to do. It's a terrifying time of saying, oh, frig, I got no clue. I have all the interviews. I have all the notes. I've recorded them all. I have everything down. I have no clue what the thing is going to look like. I have no idea what the thing is going to play like. How long is it going to take? What kinds of key decisions are there going to be? Whatever. And so there's always that fear, that uncertainty, that doubt, that misery of, this is going to be the one that bombs. This is going to be the nightmare. And then usually it's my subconscious, not my conscious, that comes up with the answers in terms of coming up with a bunch of really cool ideas or really bad ideas, and depending on the day. And then I come up with some ideas, and then you kind of pitch them to your client and say, here's the idea. What if we had a merchant simulation where a merchant is growing his or her company, from a pretty small to a pretty, to a medium-sized company. So we're going to do that scale, and let's have some of the decisions that person has to make be around purchasing options. So, we're going to start off with someone who has just a checkbook, cash and carry kind of business. Maybe so. Okay, we're going to do say a pizza restaurant with three restaurants, and because why not pizza? It sounds more interesting than other things in this day and age, and people sort of know what it's like to go to a pizza place. Now we'll give them some decisions around growing the company, and so. Then eventually, and then the client either likes the idea or not. And in this case, the client did like the idea and say, okay, so a lot of the decisions are going to be around purchasing decisions, like do we accept credit cards? That's sort of the big one. And then do we accept mobile payments? And then do we invest in back-end systems around those mobile payments to start having AI and start having predictive abilities? And do we invest in a instead of investing in a superior credit card system, do we maybe offer more things at our stores? So instead of just offering pizza, we offer T-shirts and we offer other things. And then from the T-shirts, you can say, well, what if we have frictionless selling, like Amazon Go stores? What if we invest in frictionless selling? What if we invest in big data programs to start having predictive coupons going out to people and maybe in a mobile system as they walk by the store, or if it's 5 o'clock they get a coupon for a lower cost pizza or a free drink to go with their pizza, whatever. And then so start both allowing someone to grow their business, but growing it by making both decisions around finance systems, but also decisions around their own strategy and what do they actually care about, which isn't the credit cards. But in some cases, the credit cards become enablers to much more complicated systems. By the end of this game, which is only 5 turns, and so you're only making 5 decisions. Each of the 5 decisions is so it's a very, very, it's still a short sim. It's still a very focused experience. But by the end of it, you could have evolved your company in any of 10 different ways. In some cases, you can evolve it to be completely get rid of the restaurant altogether and have it be a completely delivery service only, but to an entire city. You can evolve it in a completely different way and again have a frictionless store like the Amazon Go stores. You can evolve it a third way and have it be like vending machines all over the city. You can evolve it a fourth way by having a very, very high touch, 5-star superior, restaurant. You can evolve it another way by just having, cheap pizza restaurants everywhere, whatever. And so it's a lot of fun. But all the time, the issues of credit cards and credit card decisions are around them. And so whenever people play this, and again, it's a very short game. It's only 5 decisions, but it forces them to think about what the businesses care about, which is growing their business and sort of getting and being successful, and then not credit card centric, except the role of credit card as an enabling tool, much the way that IT was an enabling tool for businesses, say 20 years ago, became a really interesting theme.
Absolutely it is. And that makes a lot of sense, and all the things that you've been telling us, I think there's a lot of value to derive from this conversation. Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @RobAlvarezB and the hashtag #ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement. So, Clark, the next question that I want to make you is if you have any sort of, maybe you can call it best practice or something that you would say if you're going to do a sim, a gamification project, a short sim, this is something that you should consider, use, strategize around, whatever you want to call it, and your project would definitely be benefited from that.
Well, right now I'm going to be very predictable, and which is again this notion of a short sim is a really interesting one, which is basically a simulation of a simulation. How do you create? Imagine that imagine you have this perfect game in mind. It's an incredibly cool AAA, fabulous computer game that teaches stuff. Can you create a storyboard of it? And then take that storyboard and can you make that storyboard itself interactive? And there's plenty of tools out there today that allow you to sort of branch together your storyboard. And so if you do that as an iterative process, you can create a highly satisfying, highly engaging simulation of your simulation of your game that provides a terrific learning experience for anyone taking it. In a lot of cases, that experience is utterly sufficient. You don't have to make the AAA game, which, by the way, is incredibly expensive and hard to change once you've built it and hard to deploy because of platform problems. So if you can take your simulation of a simulation, take your interactive storyboards, and then try that with audiences. And if they love it, then you're on the right track to make the full game if you still want to. But in a lot of cases, you actually won't want to. You'll be very happy with the mid result. If it doesn't work, if it's a failure, and I've been there too, that taking this idea and making a computer, a full computer game out of it would be a disaster, and because it doesn't resonate. So I think that's a really, really productive first step. And the nice thing about it is there's no excuses not to do it. You can create the graphics on PowerPoint. You can use clip art. You can do it in a couple of days or maybe a week or two, and you can do it by yourself. You don't need to, fundraise or get together a team of exotic skills. So I don't know anyone who shouldn't create that level of engagement before they move forward, and in some cases instead of moving forward.
Very interesting, because with all the access that there's now in the prototyping tools and that kind of things, I think I tend to agree with what you're proposing here.
I was talking to Will Wright a long time ago, and he said to make a game 20% better costs 3 times as much. And at some point we use that as an excuse not to go ahead, rather than as a cautionary tale. And especially in the education space, I don't really try to make simulations that are played for fun. I try to have them have a real goal, and I want to respect people's time, and I want to get them through the experience as fast as possible. But along the way, I want to enable them to be creative. I want them to enable them to have fun. I want them to enable them to, my biggest criteria, my biggest success criteria for any short sim that I make is how often does someone replay it? There's replaying it once or twice to get it right, to get a good score. But then how often do people keep replaying the simulation after they got a passing score? And to me, that's always the biggest success criteria. And sometimes you get people playing it 5 or 6 or 7 times, exploring the space in much more detail, trying different things, like in that restaurant sim. Okay, I got one ending, but then I heard a friend got a different kind of ending. How can I get that? And what if I invested harder in concierge services, and maybe if I invested more in more restaurants or whatever? But people start thinking about different ways of playing it. So the creativity is really important, and the replayability is a great metric as well. But you don't need super graphics to do that. One of the great things about a lot of the mobile games is that they don't have great graphics, and so but they're still fun and compelling.
Yeah, they definitely are. And in that same sense, you were talking about mobile games, but what would you say is your favorite game?
My favorite game to play?
Yes.
Well, I guess yesterday I played 2 games, which are both really great games, and one of them was Fallout 4, and one of them was Robotron, the old arcade game. So that's about so I guess I like dystopian futures a lot. I'll take them any way I can get them.
There you go. After listening to some of the questions that we do here, the whole vibe, the storytelling, and so on, is there somebody that comes to your mind that you would like to listen to in an interview like this one in Professor Game?
I have a friend, Peter Shea, who's a very deep thinker when it comes to educational experiences and trying to figure out the right path for education to evolve moving forward. And one book I wrote, by the way, is Unschooling Rules, which is trying to deconstruct the school experience and then almost rebuild it from elements that exist today, as opposed to sort of 100 years ago when schools were kind of designed. And so he's sort of a colleague of mine who plays with what is the shape of content going to be in the future. Another really interesting person founded the Acton Academy, a guy named Jeff Sandifer. And Jeff Sandifer has been, once again, recreating education in a very pure sense with his wife, in terms of having a bunch of middle schools and high schools that are around, that are student-centric in the absolute sense of the word. I mean, so we talk about student-centric and we don't have a clue how that actually looks. He has revisualized schools as student-centric experiences, and in a lot of cases, the students run the places. In a lot of cases, in some cases, they have rebellions, and sometimes they create new rules, and they create contracts with each other, and it's a really fascinating experience to be inside one of the Acton Academy schools, because it feels like you're in some kind of Silicon Valley startup. It has like this productive hum, which never gets either into the dead silent library feel nor to the out of control chaos feel. It always has this sort of this pulsating energy moving forward. And he's a huge advocate, and he's constantly challenging other people, including myself, of saying, how can we make this game-like? How can we make the experience of being a student game-like in every way? How do we give people choices? How do we give people consequences? How do we make the consequences real, not artificial? How do we have people leveling up, and how do we have teams work together to solve goals in a way that has sort of that fun feel? And so I know I've done some stuff for him and with him to achieve that. And he was certainly someone who helped me think through the rules of Unschooling Rules as well. And so I certainly owe him a lot. But it's an incredibly if you want to see someone who actually is living the student-centric educational experience with a game flavor, it is he.
Sounds like a very interesting character to interview for sure. And in that same sense of recommendations, aside from your books, which are definitely going to be in the show notes, what book would you recommend to the engagers and why?
I don't read enough books anymore. I got to be honest. Unfortunately, I adore podcasts, and I get most of my information from that. I don't find books are really, really frustrating for me. I challenge the affordances of books all the time. I don't like linear structures at all. The last book I wrote, or the Complete Guide to Simulations and Serious Games, was written as a big, almost like an encyclopedia, as a reference book. And the reason I chose a reference book as a structure is because I wanted a nonlinear experience that someone can open up randomly, read something, and either be interested, and if they were interested, read around it, the entries before and after, and if they were not interested, sort of to reopen the book in a random place and read that as well. And so the last book I'm doing, which is just the book I'm just finishing up right now on short sims, it's both a book in terms of it has a beginning, middle, and end, and chapters and sections, but also has embedded simulations in it. So all the stuff that I'm talking about, like short sims, you read a few paragraphs and then you play one, and like here's what I mean, and by the way, here's what it looks like under the covers, and here's how it works. At the same time, I have a lot of embedded audio clips of conversations I've had with various experts, and I embed those audio clips in the book. And so, you kind of get bored of reading. Well, let's click on an audio clip and let's hear that, and let's hear the author's voice, and let's hear the some other person who's smarter than the author, in my case's voice, and what he or she is saying. And and again, in some cases, having little animations of, okay, I'm talking about something, here's how it looks, like a la YouTube. And so I really chomp at the bit of books a lot, and both from an author perspective, but there's a style of leadership called directive, which is I tell you what to do because I'm smarter than you. And I hate that style I hate being on either side of that leadership style. I hate being the expert, lecturing people on what to do, because half the time or more they know a lot more about than I do in most of the areas. Likewise, I hate being the recipient of that kind of directive leadership. Okay, I'm going to sit and learn from by how smart you are. I want to challenge. I want to push back. I want to be snarky. I want to deconstruct the experience. I don't want to sit there and be a recipient. So for books, it's a challenge that I'm having consistently is, how do I, as an author or someone who likes writing books and finds them valuable, still deconstruct the affordances of traditional textbooks as much as possible to make them, in some cases, funny. And my great failings in some books is not making them funny at all or funny enough, but also making them student-centric as well. Unschooling Rules as a book is a form of, basically, it's just 55 very short chapters that you can read in any order you want. You can show them to people, whatever. It becomes more of a talking point. It becomes more of a way of facilitating conversations rather than I'm going to sit down one-on-one and be immersed in this world. So that's my problem with books. I'll shut up now.
No more books on the horizon for you now.
No, I don't know. I mean, I spent a lot. I mean, I love books growing up. I used to read books all the time. I used to have a 2-hour commute each day, and the best thing for me to do was to go to a library and get out the biggest, thickest book on tape I could find. And literally, my criteria for picking out a book was the thicker the better, because I could use it more. And I read everything, and I consumed it greedily, and I loved it. And so I probably spent 30 years of my life just reading everything I could all the time voraciously. And then again, the format itself became increasingly frustrating for me.
Very interesting. New perspective as well. And we've been talking about many of the fantastic things that you've been doing, both the successes and the failures. But I would like to know you personally, Clark. What would you say is your superpower when creating these short sims or games or whatever you are creating at the moment?
I think I'm really good at coming up with a microcosm. I'm really good at kind of trying to distill something to its essence. And I'll give you one example, which is I was building for some for the Gates Foundation, making some open source textbooks on economics. I was helping them with some of the interactive experiences for those textbooks. And so the question was like a demand curve. How do you take a demand curve and help people learn how to do that? And so for me, what I'm awfully good at doing is saying, okay, what is the experience that maps to a demand curve? What is a thing that makes the demand curve itself self-evident? In this case, I chose some food trucks. And saying, and having food trucks selling drinks in this case, and the hotter it is, the more the cost of food trucks, the more you could raise the prices on your drinks because it's hotter out or colder. Likewise, if you raise the prices, the lines go down, and you can see the lines. And so if you're saying, okay, I'm going to increase my drink cost from $1.50 to $1.75, oh, I've lost two people in line. Okay, I'm going to raise it from $1.75 to $2.25. Okay, I've now lost a few more people in line. Okay, I've lowered the price, and so you can have this sort of self-evident example where you run this little food truck and you raise and lower the prices, and maybe you have a goal of saying, how do you create demand of 7, or how do you, make the equivalent of a line of 7 people waiting for your drink, and allow people to play with it. And so by creating the right simulation, by creating the right experience, you don't have to teach anything. You don't have to say a dang thing. People can play it, and after 5 minutes of playing it, especially if you visualize it, you have this graph that's being built in the corner, and I go, don't worry about it, but I'm just keeping notes here. After playing it for 5 minutes, you've created a demand curve, and it becomes incredibly self-evident what a demand curve is. You don't have to learn anymore. It's like, okay, that's what a demand curve is, and it becomes explicit. I'll give you one more example of that, which is like how I start off the book, which is saying, okay, here's a question for you. Let's say you can earn $10 an hour. It's Monday afternoon. And instead of earning $10 an hour, you decide to rent a movie. You decide to rent a 2-hour movie that costs you $5 to rent the movie. And so my question for you is, how much did it cost you to watch that movie? And I'll give you two answers. One is $5. One is $25. And it's not hard. Every single person in the world goes 5. Oh, wait, no, 25, because I have those two answers there for them. And so in a second, they self-teach themselves the entire concept of opportunity costs. And they understand opportunity costs, and they learn it. They don't have to sit for an hour hearing some lecturer blab on about opportunity costs. They just see it and go, okay, it's self-evident to me that renting a movie for $5 and not earning $10 an hour cost me $25 to watch. And so probably the thing I like doing the most is creating those sort of moments, the Socratic moments where somebody becomes self-evident, and so I don't need to use any words. I can just present someone with a situation, and literally in 5 seconds, they create their own situation. They create their own theories, and by creating it all in a predictable way, they own it, and they'll never forget it. And in fact, they'll defend it, as opposed to if I sat and told them about opportunity cost, they would say, "Oh no, wait, you're wrong." I'm going to try to figure out examples of proving you wrong. So that is, I think, one of the most satisfying parts of a sim. What's not my superpower, but something I wish was more, was humor in sims. And I think there's no question that allowing a sim to be funny and allowing someone to be kind of serious and focused, and then hit a moment and they laugh and they go, "Oh my God, that's funny." And every single time I've been successfully funny, and unfortunately I've probably been unsuccessfully funny plenty of times as well, but whenever I've been successfully funny, it's a wonderful moment in the sim, and if someone can actually break out laughing, it's just sort of something they weren't expecting in sort of educational experience. I think that is an incredible asset. Obviously, you don't want to have bad humor, but I think that the humorous moments are the things in my books and in my sims that when I go back and play them, 10 years later or 5 years later, it's always the humor that I most sort of appreciate.
That sounds absolutely great. So we're getting to the end of the interview today. Clark, this has been a fantastic chat. There's been a lot of value being dropped. But before we go, I would like to ask you if you have any quick advice or any final advice for the engagers, people who might be either deep into the field, in the middle stage, or especially those who are starting, who are always eager to find new information, look up to people like yourself who have been doing this for a while and have some success and to learn from. And of course, let us know where we can find you, where we can find that fantastic list of books as well. And then we'll say that it's for now game over.
Fantastic. I think the advice, which is going to be very consistent, is just get a lot of experience under your belt, and the whole short sim approach, the storyboard approach, the sim of a sim approach. The whole reason to do that is just to get as many interfaces under your belt, put yourself in as many situations as possible where you hear a problem, hear a false situation, understand it, research it, and then create a short sim to allow people to learn it. It's a 10,000 hour thing. Whether or not that's true or not, who cares? Get as much experience under your belt as possible, and have to deal with as many problems as possible, and just build all your skills and understand it as much as possible. And again, you don't need a giant exotic technology team to do it. You can literally do it, in your office or in your basement with with one good program and some kind of PowerPoint or some kind of illustration program, and then bang away. So just create as many of them as you possibly can. Nonprofits, by the way, are a great place. They're always very grateful, and they always have educational goals in mind. And so, if you want to do some free work or some very low-paying work, engage some local nonprofits and sort of help them with some of their instructional goals, and they'll love you for it. But also, you'll feel good about it, and you also get experience.
That sounds great. Sounds great. Where can we find you if you want to ask you any future questions?
Sure. My email is Clark, CLARK, at shortsims, SHORTSIMS.com. And that's the best place to get a hold of me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much once again for your time. I know there's many short sims waiting to be done by you. And since they were done so fast, maybe during this conversation, you would have half a sim by now. So we really, really appreciate the fact that you took the time to be here with us, with the Engagers. But for now, it's time to say thank you and then to say that it's game over.
So I died. Is that it? I died for the third time, I think is what you're trying to say. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Engagers, it is fantastic to have you here. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Clark. And are you using Instagram? I'm working more and more. I'm publishing constantly and I'm into Instagram. And I want to take the best advantage to communicate with you. So I would like to ask you if you want, and if you have your account, I would love to connect with you there. Which, just like in Twitter, my username is Rob Alvarez B. And before you go on to your next mission, of course, would you like to know what's coming up in Professor Game? Then all you have to do is subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.